Wow.
We have a guest again. Yes.
Hey.
Sorry for our infrastructure troubles last week, but it was going to be worth it. It's going to be so worth it. We have our old friend and buddy, Robert Sirchia here. Hello. Hold on a second. His name is not spelled the same as his shirt.
No, it's not. It looks the same though.
It looks the same though, but that's so. If you forget, just remember the shirt.
So yeah, we all used to work at the same company back in the day. We've gone our different ways, and now it's just a good time for us to get back together and kind of chat and see how things are going. And
indeed,
you know,
we're still in the cloud. We're still in the cloud.
You know, it feels like we brought the band back, which is great. I love it. Well, thank you guys for having me on your show. I don't get invited onto shows, and I always wondered why, if it was my personality or the way I looked, or
or the shirt. Maybe you were advertising. That was
maybe the shirt. So I thank you guys for allowing me to, blessing me with your presence.
Oh no, we are so honored to have you here. So here's my claim to fame to Bob's. Like when he came in, the cloud was sort of like that thing that was there. Like, yeah, it's sort of like a toy, or it's like, well, there's some people, maybe a little bit. Then Bob comes in, and all of a sudden, everybody's like, everything is cloud. You're going to do cloud. Wait a minute. Are you going to get certified? You got to get this. Wait a minute. We had to get certified in Azure, AWS. You name a cloud. We needed to know it. Why? Because there was this other thing that they wasn't told at that time, and it was this thing called DCF, which we now know as
DCF.
Good old clown foundry that said we are the cloud of all clouds. Or is it? What was that? Well, how did that come about? Because I know when Bob showed up, all of a sudden it was like we were properly in the cloud, is what it felt like.
So I think we got to take a step back, because what happened was Microsoft .NET was never a first-class citizen on any other cloud, and we know that. And I'm a .NET fan. I will talk. You guys know how much I love it. And I would make no apologies for it. Then Cloud Foundry came in, and all of a sudden, they're like, we want to show you guys love. And Pivotal had a prescriptive way of doing it. And you kind of fell in love with that prescriptive way of just seeing results. And as developers, and not systems engineers, because those are two different things, but as developers, we want to get to, production faster, right? And that was their whole mantra. And at that time, Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes were battling it out for supremacy. Both of them were complex, but Pivotal's, their approach was more of result driven. And I think that's why a lot of us did it. And I think when we look back, and obviously hindsight's 2020, we were pretty militant about it. But then, that was an understatement. I get it. But then we turn around and we look at where we're at in the cloud, and .NET's running everywhere. Right. And it has a small footprint. It's doing amazing things on all of the hyperscalers. I do a lot of my demos in .NET, not just because I'm showing Microsoft any love. It's just, it's familiar for me.
Right.
It's familiar for me. So, everyone's like, oh, you can do it in Node. You can do it in this and this. And I'm like, yeah, I can do it in Rust too, if you guys really want me to do it in Rust. But and looking back, I think, if you look at what, the company we all worked at, I should just disclaim, is no longer in existence. It was bought by a bigger company that was bought by another bigger company, or whatever the story goes. I know it was like the Whale 8 or something, but the company we worked for, the cloud was really not a thing. And then we came in, and it just, you got to see like the difference that it changed the whole organization. And, when you look back now going like, that was pretty insane what we kind of accomplished in that short time period.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Then when you look at you guys like coming out of it in the consulting ranks, before it was swallowed by the big fish, how many cloud projects were there, right? There's everything was a cloud project. You were either modernizing an app to the cloud, or you were moving workloads, or my favorite was just like you get assigned to a DevOps engagement, which is, I know, absolutely terrible. People are going to trash me on, but that's what they called it. Don't trash me on Twitter. I got enough problems on Twitter. But you get on this, CI/CD engagement, and those were, to me, those are that's like the bread and butter. Those were the fun ones. Like when you got on one of those, you're like, it's nice. I'm just going to sit back and relax, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm not going to rush it.
It's like pushing the nitro button, right?
The nitro button. Well, actually, if you think about it, it's George Jetson. So we don't have the flying cars, but how about the George Jetson push the button? I pushed the button today, Jane. Yeah. Oh, that must have been a tough day, right? It's like George Jetson behind the scenes didn't know what CI/CD was, but we're going to tell you that's what's sitting underneath that DevOpsy thing. Infrastructure as code. Our pet peeve of people who say, "But I still had to touch that by hand." And we're like, "No, then you did not do DevOps. You're not doing DevOps." Oh, I did this. Nope.
Yeah, we have to approve. Wait. Can you put a step in there where I have to approve it? No. No.
No. That's maybe Skynet's job. What are you doing?
And obviously, for ISO, you have to have some aspects of. And apparently, my neighbors are deciding to mow the lawn today. I apologize.
Oh.
But
you didn't get approval.
They didn't get approval. No. Sometimes, because what I do now, my job now requires me to be in front of cameras a lot. But I would mow his lawn just so I knew he wasn't going to mow it at the time I didn't want to. And so my wife couldn't figure out what I was doing and why. She's like, "Why are you mowing the neighbor's lawn? What are you doing, weirdo?" And it was just preventing him from doing it at a time that wasn't convenient for me. I'm like, "Can you just do it at 8 in the morning when I don't have any live shows?"
Wait, hold on a second. This underscores why Bob was so good at what he was doing. He saw ahead at what needed to be done so that we didn't have the pain later. The thing about all the cloud tech that was coming up back then, which is why we loved looking at his webinars and other things back then, was he was just showing hey, you want to have pain? Sure. Why? You didn't need to have pain if you followed what is not really, it turns out to be not really rocket science, but busy work. Yeah, okay, you got to do it now. But that's so busy. I got to do that now. Well, if you don't do it now, guess what? What's going to happen later?
Figure later. Yeah. Prior planning prevents poor performance. You can add another, you can add some more P's in there if you want. But
so I've always found it interesting though. Is I look back towards those days and the test-driven development. Now I look back and I say because a lot of times in consulting, your customers are like, "Oh, we don't need you to write tests. Just make it work." Yep. And you're like, and you have this moment with them, and you're like, "Well, what if it works?" And you're like, "Well, can we qualify that?" And we go back and forth with it. But now more than ever, especially because I work in the open source world right now. I work for a company called Suse. We make
great. Yes.
Make Linux, we make Kubernetes, tools and tooling around that. I can talk about I'm sure you guys have questions and I have answers.
Rancher, baby.
That's coming.
Love that. Thank you.
Let's talk about this company though.
Is a huge thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But even in the open source world, you appreciate tests more than not. So sometimes what I do is I pull down, and in the open source world, you have to understand, we flip between languages quite frequently. So you have to go from Rust to Go. From Go, I go into .NET to do a demo. We still have Python in certain places. I know Yast is, I think, completely written in Python. I don't see Perl, thank God. A lot of our demos are done in Node.js because it's easy and stuff like that. I'm moving away from that, and we have some Java. Vue, if you guys ever know, underneath the hood of Rancher is Vue. That's why it makes it life a lot easy. But I'll go through it and then I'll play with it. And I don't normally code on these projects, but then I'll decide to write a unit test when I find where there's not one, and I try to write a test to run something. Why? Because I've noticed that it lacks in the open source world, and I don't know if it's just, I don't know why, but it's just you see it now. There's some projects that are truly test driven, and you can see the maintainers keeping up on that, and they're just militant about it. You guys thought I was bad. They're just the no hammer comes in no. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. But I never appreciated unit tests until I came here and I started looking at stuff going wow, man, there's no oh my God, there's no, I know this works.
Yeah. And if you don't have those tests, that it's easy to accidentally add regressions. You don't know what the behavior is supposed to be. There's nothing. But if you have the test, and I love that, going into an open source project, especially if it's in a language you don't know, but even if it's in a language you know, being able just to run the test and watch the code exercise the way that it's supposed to work. I mean, tests or documentation of it.
Watching the inside of the piano when it auto plays or something like that. It's like, it has its own relaxation factor to some extent when everything is working.
It's the green check marks. You guys remember that in Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio? You would just watch it and it was like green. Like,
yes,
you have a red and you're like, what? And then you had to wait for everything to finish. And you're like, and sometimes like you would run the whole suite just because like you didn't need to. You'd run it on one the project or the solution or just the project you were working on.
I remember.
And you just could not hit the whole solution because you're like
guilty pleasure is what it was. They call it back in the day. Just to hit the F5 and just go. Wait, you hit it on the solution. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh,
let me go get. You go get coffee. Basically, you go get coffee. It's over here.
So, I mean, that, to come back to Cloud Foundry, Cloud Foundry is still alive, right? And
it is.
And it still exists. It's now running on top of Kubernetes. But, I mean, I almost think that it's sort of the Betamax versus VHS, throwback, right? Betamax was better technically, and it served, but they were serving different purposes.
Yeah, and so building, yes. All right. So I'm going to address it. Yes, Cloud Foundry is still around. Don't know many customers who still use it. I know VMware has customers who still love it. When I did a lot of work with VMware before coming over to Suse, I would talk to customers and they were like, we're not. It was like a Charleston Heston moment for my cold dead hands. And because it was developer productivity, right? And it's what Kubernetes just didn't have. It's still kind of wonky with it because for some reason people believe developers care about Kubernetes and they don't. Now, I'm going to unpack that. There's a difference between an engineer, right, in software and a developer in software. So as a developer, I solve business problems with code. As an engineer, I'm solving technical problems with code. So a software engineer I would classify someone working on Helm, right? That individual's doing that. But if you and I are writing .NET applications that are going to be deployed to solve some business use case for a financial institution, we are developers. And those are two different things. What I have a hard time in my world is talking to people because they think we're one and the same, right? And we're not. When's the last time a .NET developer really gave a rat about memory? We just don't care about it. Just throw some more. Right. There's a memory leak in there.
That's not our problem. Exactly.
Throw some more. Then you just blame ops. You're like, hey man, just give the thing more RAM. I don't care. Like, go ahead. Like, up the RAM on that thing. We never cared about that. In a system, like an underlying system or something goes against the OS, that's critical. I mean, that's mission critical. But for like us, we've never really cared about it. Not to say that we haven't had issues in there, but it wasn't top of the funnel for us to care about. Right. And so developers never cared about the Kubernetes, and they still pretty much don't. Like if I go and talk to a developer, and my wife's a developer, right? She's a React front-end developer, which is a bad example, but even Java developers, I'm like, hey man, how's Spring? How's this? What are you guys doing? And they're like, yeah. I was like, what do you think about, Kubernetes? They're like, what? They just getting them excited. And so for us, when you move up from like mid-level to senior to, associate principal or whatever, and you get up to that architect level, you start caring about it, but you don't care about the underlying things, right? You don't care about where your secrets are managed. You just need it at runtime. So you're like, okay, whatever. There's a framework for it. And it's trying to get people to understand that there's a difference between that. Now, where I work, we have a lot of interesting projects, and I'm not trying to plug any of them, but that experience for Cloud Foundry, that CF push, right? And we all loved it. We're attempting to, I don't want to say recreate it, but we have a project called Apinio, and it just went GA. And we'll be talking about Apinio, not next month, but the month after, in September. We're going to do a whole
for it, Larry. Remember to put a link for it.
Yeah, it's Apinio.io, but it's literally an app that is deployed into Kubernetes. It'll take your app, it takes the business application you have, packages it all up, and it throws it up there, and it makes your life so much easier with it, right? And so, really good friends with the product manager of that project, and he's, this is his baby. Right, he's trying to recreate that because he understands that developers don't care about Kubernetes, right? Like for the most part, we don't. Rare unicorns in there will actually care about it. So this is kind of abstracts that away. And I like it because it's a lot of the best practices to get started with. And if you're like, oh, okay, I'm learning Kubernetes, but if you're not an operator, do you really care about that? Half the stuff? Not really. You have other things to care about.
And if anything that you put between the solution and the implementation, right? Anything that goes in between there that is not delivering value, right, and solving that business problem is overhead. And that's what, you know, we pay an upfront cost. We put some CapEx into our DevOps pipeline so that we don't have to continually pay that. And reducing that friction and letting that just, I mean, really, yeah, CF push, man, that was so easy because it just worked.
At the time, it was very revolutionary, right? And you know, we all got kind of drunk off the prescriptive way Cloud Found or Pivotal did, app delivery, right? We did paired programming, and it's hard. That's emotionally taxing if you're not used to it. And
I was going to get there. That was one of the things that said, well, here's the one caveat to all of it was that you had to do pair programming on penalty of walk the plank.
I think I wrote so the feedback I got from other Magenta cons, they hated pair programming. Absolutely. I mean, they were gonna like hard other teams that came into it. So I had to come up with like team up where you guys could it was like less emotionally taxing on people. It's like, hey, we just kind of talk throughout the day and we have a cadence of when we talk and we make sure we talk because we're in sync. But if you were emotionally available enough to do paired programming and you could bring a junior developer up to speed faster, that was amazing to watch. Because so for your audience, Magenic had the minor leagues. We had people out of tech schools, people out of college. We call it the MDC. And these are individuals that are new in their career. We've been I don't want to say we had low expectations, but they were junior developers, truly junior developers. Fresh. They were fresh. But I just remember just pair programming with one while I was in Minneapolis for a whole week. And he laughed and he was just like, I'm ready to go take on the world, because it was just, we just went at it. And so that was kind of cool to see it. But it's, again, a very emotionally taxing. I don't see it as much in the open source. I don't even hear about it as often. Like you'll hear a grumble every once in a while that someone did it. I'm like, oh, really? That's cool. That's cool. How was it? You just but you hear it, but you don't hear it like you did in the old days.
It could be because we're all remote these days, so no one has that same kind of emotional effect when you can actually turn off the screen or turn the speaker off while you're at it.
Yeah. COVID has really kind of threw a monkey wrench in it, and I think it kind of exposed that we never really needed to be in the office. That I was always a remote employee, and I've realized that when I had to go to the office, I did a lot less work. So I got excited when I had to go to Minneapolis. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be cold. Who cares? I want to do nothing this week. When we had to fly to, we had a client, and I don't want to name him here, but we had a client in Denver, and we'd have to fly there once a month, and they would keep us in there for 10 hours a day. I'd still get less work there than I did at home, because I'd get home and I'd be like, oh, that's how to fix that. Dang it, I gotta go back in there. And I was obsessing about code.
Larry's talking about you.
I was obsessing about it. So,
oh man.
But so it sounds like you guys are doing amazing. You guys have your show. I need to do more of these live ones. I'm managing the community for Suse right now, with one other on my team who's ironically in the States, but he's in Boston right now at an AWS conference. It's unfortunate because he's in South Africa and I wanted to meet him in person.
Oh, yeah.
But I am my Harvester instances took a dump, and so I have to take these and reinstall Harvester on those, so I got work to do on that. A lot of work with Harvester. They're supposedly having a release sometime soon. So I got to get that up and running and going. So a lot of good, cool projects. Kube Warden, I talk about it quite frequently, and it's policy as code. And I don't know why I love it so much.
Code.
Policy as code. So Kube Warden is like you install it in Kubernetes and you can apply. And the reason I love it was because of we had a PCF instance at Magenic, right? It was sitting in the data center, and people had access to things, and it had some RBAC, and but people would over provision. I'd go in there and like the server's going down. I'm like, what? And I'm losing my mind. And I was taking so much of my day trying to figure this out. So when I started here at Suse, like I had to go through all of the projects, and people don't realize we have a lot. We have a lot, and like even on the Linux side, I got an understanding of all of our, and then all of a sudden there's like some new thing that we're doing in Linux. I'm like, what happened? I just got up to speed. Who's working on this? And that's like, it's just vast. But so we're broken into like the Kubernetes side and our Linux side, and we have an edge side. So there's three facets of what SUSE is. And so on the Kubernetes side, when I found Kube Warden, it solved the problem that I was having in PCF. And it was like, wow, where was this? Like my entire, and so these guys did a fantastic job at it. It's written in Rust. And so and when I looked at Rust a few years ago, it was rough. Like it was awful. Like you still needed C modules. You had all this stuff that you had to like bubblegum together. But Kube Warden, you can write your own web assemblies in multitude of languages, but they primarily wrote them in Rust. So not only did finding Kube Warden, I found that it solved a problem that companies, anyone who's managing a cluster needs to lock it down. Just things like, I don't want you to over provision. I don't want you to name that pod, with swear words, right? Because we used to have that in PCF, and people were like, "Did you know about this?" I'm like, and I didn't have it. So Kube Warden has a whole hub where if you don't want to write your own policies, we actually recommend that you go to the hub first. If you find it there, use it. If you don't, then write it. But I got to then learn Rust, and writing Rust it's painful because it brought you back to the college days of worrying about memory. By ref and by val is by far one of
that's so VB-ish that I'm scared.
Punishing. It's so punishing. And my wife's like, "Why are you doing this? You're a freak." And I'm like, but when you see what you built in Rust, and it's a language that's not idiomatic. Like I can jump comfortably between Java and .NET, right? No big deal. Go from .NET to Rust and try to put your brain around it. And so it was interesting. But Kube Warden was like one of my first projects I fell in love with. Harvester was, I would say, the second one, because Harvester gave me the ability to run VMs at home locally. And before you would have, you could take a bunch of open source things, slam them together, tweak it, spend all week trying to get a VM up and running, or you had Harvester.
And Harvester is for anyone that I think we talked about it a little bit before on the show, but it's bare metal too. You can get you don't have a lot of extra.
So the ultimate IoT.
It is. So we know of people who take these NUCs, they run Harvester on it, and then first of all, it's conceptualizing. You have to conceptualize it slightly different. Harvester is a Kubernetes node that you got one too. Everyone's
love it, man.
We just carry them around. They're expensive now. They're like $2,000. But Harvester is installed onto a bare metal as a host or a node, and it acts as a hypervisor, but it's Kubernetes. And then what people forget is that you still have to put Kubernetes on top of it, but you manage Harvester as Kubernetes. So it makes your life a lot easier for that. There's a conceptual difference though. When you have multitude of Harvester nodes or hosts tied together, there's one who's primary the control plane, but they each can actually have their own control plane with workloads running on it. And that's a departure from what you see in Kubernetes is where they go, there's control planes, which is formerly called the master nodes. And then you have your worker nodes over here, or your agent nodes. They've gone away with that. And you're seeing that model right now in K3S where people are now taking, I don't even have Raspberry Pis up here to demo, but they'll take K3S and they'll have 3 management nodes or control plane nodes that have workloads on it. And it's, it's high availability. One fails, you can swap it out, not that big of a deal. But it's breaking that paradigm of that. But when getting back to Harvester, that project was awesome because all of a sudden now I can spin up a VM and do stuff and not worry about anything. And so especially it's helpful when we have some new, I don't want to say like, and it's not sounding bad about it. When there's some new Linux thing coming out and I have to go look at it, it's so much easier for me to go and I just spin it up there and it's working. And I had some clusters up there running, but I blow them away so fast it's not even funny. But we have
the whole point though. You can just go bring them up, bring them down. That was the nirvana we were get to. It's like build up, build down. The old cloud architecture is all about, right?
Yeah, and anyone who's going for like their CKA or that's running a few VMs on top of a NUC with Harvester on it is so easy to do and easy to manage. When it comes to the CKAD, I always say don't go with that extra overhead. When you look at the curriculum, Rancher Desktop, which is probably my 3rd favorite. I talk about that a lot. I'm sure you guys.
No, you can't say favorites, right? They're like your children. Right?
I don't care what anyone. I love all my kids.
The 5-year-old, however.
I love all my kids, but I won't be abashed to tell you my daughter's my favorite. Like people will say you can't have a favorite. I'm like, yes, you can. Everyone does. Like, there's no way. Like, it's human. And my son's not here to hear me. But but when you're going for your CKAD, the Rancher Desktop tool is amazing, and that team came together and they did what .NET developers love. They gave us a GUI, right? And here's me going. And there's silly tools in there. Like there's a switcher. If you have a Mac, it's in the tool tray for Windows. I don't know. I don't like to use Windows often, but there's a tool tray. You can hit it and you can switch your context, and you can just like click, and instantly what context you're in. Right. And here's me going like, and I was using that so much to do different things at demos. It was just something so stupid like that. But I can be like, where am I? Hold on. Oh, there. The ability to blow away and do like a factory reset, or for a developer, Rancher Desktop, I can deploy everything to my desktop cluster, right? And then let's update Kubernetes, because you can upgrade and your app stays the same, and you can just test it and you can play with it and see what breaks. And so when you're doing upgrade testing, you're for a developer, that's the bee's knees right there. You're like, oh. Now, there's a caveat. If you're downgrading, it will destroy your app. It blows everything away. But how many times have you messed up a cluster? And like, especially like spinning something up on a NUC with Harvester, it's still, there's overhead. Even with pipelines, there's still overhead that you have to go do. Versus, I just want to I want to develop and put an app running in Kubernetes. What is that going to take? Rancher Desktop is by far one of the easy tools to use for it. And we see a huge group of people using that. Like I get on our Slack channel, I think when Docker changed their business model, I was answering questions left and right. It was like, hey, whoa, how are you using it? Let's see. And so that was kind of an interesting having to go forth.
It came out, it was at the right place at the right time to take a lot of that load from, what Docker used to do, what the Docker desktop did. Rancher is actually doing better and doing different things, but it fulfills the need that a lot of people had. And, just you click a button and you reset your cluster without having to go through and, well, let me download. Where did I download? Where did I save this package?
At the end of the day, it's not always about scripting it. Like, well, I can script it. I can type in the command line. It's like, well, hold on a second. It's not the same experience, because sometimes it is about the experience of the let's just say the worker. At some point, yes, it'll go behind the wall, behind the system, behind the cloud. It's all running automatically. But by that time, all your problems are solved. But while you're still working on it, you can't go and be like Ray Charles working on it all the time. If you have eyes, you want to use them.
And the thing is, you're writing that script is not solving your problem. We're back to the point again where you're not solving the business problem anymore.
That's true. Exactly. You're now your configuration. Yeah.
Love it.
I even say the same thing about sometimes some automations. Like, well, the saying is like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, you know what? That means you can automate it. But however, it also means that whatever it is going to stay as it is. If you think it's not broke, the question is, if you think it's not broke, are you sure it really is not broke? Sometimes you may not want to automate it or go through the whole process of fixing it, leaving it as is. Again, the case of configuration, I can configure it to death to make it do exactly what it did before. Hey, yes, my job is done. It's like, wait a minute. Yeah, we didn't really mean to make it work exactly the same. We wanted it to be better. Oh, you want it to be better. Oh, well, here's how much that's going to cost. I'm sorry. I thought you just wanted to move it, the shift and lift, right? It's like, but it's not always about shift and lift. It's about, if you're going to go there, you're going to go to the place and be appropriate for the place. It's like saying, well, I'm going to take like the Ford, the Model T model car because it works so well and use it again. You know, exactly is. Oh, sure. I'll put like the Tesla batteries in there or whatever. Of course I can do that. But why? What am I doing that for? That's not what I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, and getting back to the automation, the new hotness right now, and I don't want to call it the new hotness because in the cloud, in the CNCF ecosystem, things, the dumpster fires, you know, are lit and put out daily in our ecosystem, right? And I get to say that because I work in it, right? But one of the new hotness, and I don't want to call it dumpster fire because it's GitOps, right? Where it's like you're not pushing, but you're pulling your state. And so at the edge, it is a different, it's a different paradigm. So you have to remind people that, you know, it's like, hey, that node, that instance, that NUC, right? It might be online, it might not. It could be air gapped. And so when it comes online, it goes out and says, hey, am I up to date? If not, it updates. So you got to make sure what you have in your Git is what it needs to be. And that new hotness, I did a talk 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago with Dan Garfield from CodeFresh. He came on my platform and he talked about Argo CD. And I had to appreciate it because he did something that I'm really terrible about with my demos. He was demoing Argo CD and CodeFresh and all the stuff, the awesome stuff CodeFresh does with it in his home lab, but he was running a vRising server with Wine in a Linux container, right? That was like over a gig. And so, but it kept my attention because I'm like, so your home, like the use case was so cool because he wrapped it around video games and he's showing us how and why. And so here's me going like Argo CD was taken to a whole new level from the guys at CodeFresh because how he did a demo and he's like, yeah, I have it running on this Wine server and we all my friends play it and stuff like this. And here's me going like, wow, that's a really damn good demo. Like I'm impressed. Like, but it was really cool. It's some really cool technology there. The folks over there at CodeFresh and the Argo CDs, you know, is an amazing project in and of itself. So I always tell people if you're into that DevOps, GitOps space, if you're into that space, that's something else to look at. Now you have the disciplines around your code have to be 100%, and there's no room for error because it goes, hey, I see you made some changes. I'm going to apply them, and it does it automatically.
Well, it's a different mindset though, and I love that example. You know, the push versus pull, right? So
pull request.
I think back to the days when we cared about LUNs, right? Do you remember LUNs and databases? Nobody cares anymore, right? Why do you don't care how are we striking it across the disk? It is a database in the cloud, and you do a query against it, and you get your results.
Yeah, but
should we care?
Storage has taken a big thing because, like, you remember when we had like hard drives that spun, right? Today we have solid state, and then we have and to make it worse, we have NVMe. So when we had like like that big, spin disc, hard drive. It was like this big. And now you get this thing that's like as small as the size of my pocket knife, but thinner, and it has 10 times as much memory. And you're going, wow, like, and it's faster. Like,
and it's all
NVMe is
directly accessible, right? There's no latency. You don't have to wait for it to come around on the disk.
There's no little bus that's there sitting around and like, okay, the special bus, get all the people in there, stuffed in there, just because that's the only bus we got that's got the accessible containers. Nope, it's basically no more bus. You're in.
Robert, go ahead. You had a point.
No, I think I made a point. But this is your show. I'm on it. I'm here. What are your questions for me? So, we work together. I have questions for you guys. Like, I want to see I want to hear what you guys are doing out there in the cloud. What are you guys seeing customers use? Don't name names, but like, what are you guys seeing? And if you're saying, oh, everything's on Red Hat, you're not going to offend me, but like, what are some of the things that you guys are seeing out there in the field?
So everything that we're doing, that I'm doing right now. So just like we have the MDC, the place that I'm working now has something similar. And so I'm doing a lot of training with juniors, and really they're fresh out of college, right? They have a CS degree, and so I get to spend 2 weeks with them, kind of bringing them up to speed and a little hardcore mentoring. I had 2 hours of office hours this morning and was talking to somebody about their blog, and they want to get a blog out, they want to start writing, and they want to start contributing. And, that's something that I'm passionate about, and that's kind of part of my job. But the other part is working with clients, and they're all in the cloud. I mean, it is cloud first. It is not, it's a lot of GCP. I don't know why I got stuck with all the GCP clients, but, we're hitting a lot of GCP right now, but it's cloud first. There's not even a thought of standing up something on-prem. It's all cloud. So, and at that point, honestly, I don't care what the operating system underneath it is. We're running everything in containers. So one client is doing .NET Core, which of course is running some version of Linux, whatever GCP is running. I don't even know. I don't care. And the other one is we're doing some Python. So I've got Python developers. I actually worked with, I'm mentoring a group that's working on BrightScript. I don't know if you know BrightScript. BrightScript is here, let me pull this little guy.
You had to unplug
Roku,
it.
right? You know Roku?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
BrightScript is the language that you program in a Roku. So I've got, it's all over.
So you could say you do TV programming.
Niche.
That's a good,
TV
niche,
programming,
TV niche programming, aka Netflix. What's that?
My job, I'm a technical evangelist, right? And so I have to explain to people what I do. And so I had to go to Europe, and I was in Europe. I had to come home for a week and then leave and go back to Europe. I was heading off to Germany, and I'm at Amsterdam's airport going through customs, and the guy's like looking at my passport. He goes, "You were here a week ago." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm back. I'm going to Germany. I was in Spain, blah, 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 blah." And he goes, "What do you do for a living?" I was like, "I'm a technical evangelist, blah, blah." And then he goes, and I'm like, he's like this awkward pause. And I said, I get my radio voice on. I'm like, I'm on YouTube, and my job is to be on YouTube 24 hours a day. And I talk about technologies, and I will talk about technology. And I go in this whole thing. He goes, "Oh, I love YouTube. Go." And he just let me through. He let me into Amsterdam.
I love YouTube.
But you try to explain to people.
That cat thing.
Yeah, you try to explain to people I help people understand technology better through videos and webinars and stuff like that. And you try to explain that to people, they don't get it. And it's like, I'm on YouTube. Oh, then your neighbors are skeptical. They're like, "This is a real job. Like, is this a real? You get paid?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a dream job, but yes, that's what I do." And so it's very difficult.
People to new, really to new people. I love your show. You're always bringing in the actual people that are working on those projects, and you're introducing them to a larger audience and bringing them, shining the light on those gems,
bringing them out of the
and
shadows,
then,
so to speak.
yeah, bringing them out
Out
of
of
the
the shadows.
And everyone has like a different, I can't find a different word for it, but everyone's at a different spot in their journey, right? Right. I tried to use the word voyage and it sounded terrible, but everyone's at this different spots in their journey about learning about cloud, right?
Yes.
And
Correct.
I try to tailor it to what they're going to do or what they're trying to do. If you're a project manager and you're managing developers, I will talk to you one way and I want you to learn things that are relevant. If you are a developer, I'm going to say, here are the things that you should care about, but worry about your code coverage, your unit test coverage for your code. And,
Right.
like worry about your code. Don't worry about this. And if you're an architect, I got to put you in there. Now, if you're an operator, I make you learn. You got to learn everything. I don't care. Like that's what you're here to be punished for.
That's right.
I like to show them this. If you're an operator, do you see the CNCF landscape?
There we go.
This is your hell.
This is your home.
Yes. So it's finding the correct audience and talking about it, right? And so I get to start talking to partners more. So we're doing a lot more partner master classes. Next one, I think it's going to be Buoyant. I can say that they confirmed. So they do Linkerd, and so it's always exciting to have these partners come on, because in this ecosystem you can be competitors, you can be complementary, you can be frenemies, but we're one ecosystem and we all have to play nicely together, because you cannot not play nicely. So when you bring them on, they focus on like something that's very specific, right? And so when we had the last time Buoyant was on, Matei was the speaker and he did a deep dive on MTLS. And I learned stuff like, here's me taking notes of things I need to go back and read. And people were like, how did you not know it? I'm like, dude, I'd hate to tell you how much I forget. Like it's just like, but so I'm excited about that. So we have new themes coming up. I've restructured things slightly, and we'll have like a monthly theme based on a Suse project or product. So I think Kuborden's next month, Opinio's in the month after. I don't know what the month of October is. We don't usually go that far out, but we theme it. So we're going to be talking about these things. I'm going to say ad nauseum, but we still bring a partner in. So I'm excited to talk about that, because the partner side of things is like a breath of fresh air. And now most of the partners have been like our ISV partners, right? These are our integration partners who have tools that integrate with Rancher or something else. And so now I've asked to start going through the partners that we have from like the SIs and the GSI side, just because I want to talk about, like, we're having this conversation. I got excited when I got invited, because I'm like, what are you guys seeing out there? What's going on in the developer world? Because like it matters. Like, I don't get the time to talk to these people, and it broadens the audience, right? So my audience comes in and they're used to hearing like this, and they're like, this is what the developers think of these tools. Yeah, guess what? This is what they're caring about. And so we're going to start ramping up some SI partners as well. So I'm excited, because I like to talk about, what are you guys doing out there? How are you seeing?
You're presenting, again, kudos. You presented at multiple levels, right? You talk about you're going to be doing it over a month. You're doing multiple sessions, and each session is targeting a different audience, and you're able to really help bring people from where they are to a better place, or at least move them in the right direction, point them in the right direction. Whether you move them or not, that's up to them. But
and it also exposes like our community to other communities, right? And so everyone's just like, aren't you just one big community? No. In fact, we actually thought to take the Linux community and the Rancher community, and before I started, someone had the idea of, we'll just put them together and they'll be fine. And that was one of the, like, there's two different needs and they do things totally differently. Their ecosystems are completely different, and what we were doing is we were doing a disservice to both of them. So we kind of like let them, they naturally just separated, and then they cross over now. And the way that they're crossing over in the community is really interesting to watch, because somebody who's running RKE2 on Linux, they have a Linux issue, they're having a Linux question, and they jump over, and then they're starting to work back and forth. And when I was in Nuremberg, I got to talk about Harvester, and some of the OpenSUSE guys had no idea we had this project. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, oh, like, I'm just installing this here. I'm like, I got this NUC, and on this NUC, I'm going to put on this hypervisor, and I can spin up this VM like today, like right now. And it was like, so, but they naturally kind of spread apart. But now the crossover of collaborations there, and it goes even deeper. And so it's an interesting thing, especially when you look at some of the contributors jumping back and forth, like, because you understand how Linux contributors work and how the package maintainers do all that. That is a art form, and these people are doing the Lord's work. You guys don't know. That's a whole different conversation. We can't do it today, but just to see that crossover community, that was just an interesting. That's just interesting because, like I said, we try to lump them, but when we get to like other communities, like people who are deep within the Linker deep buoyant side of things, they care about certain aspects of it. And that crossover, like, hey, I want to use this now. How do I do that? Or I want to use traffic, and how do I use that? And you can just see how these groups just kind of go back and forth and collaborate, and it's pretty cool to watch because it's just kind of. And then all of a sudden, like this guy or gal or individual,
of course,
this individual can all of a sudden evolve into, I know how to go find it in this large ecosystem because I know I've been exposed to this new community, and it goes back and forth with that. So I think it's an interesting time right now for us is to see that level of collaboration and that level of watching, because people go, so you're the community manager? I'm like, you can't manage a community. Like, I don't think people realize that. Like, I'm a steward.
The community manage you.
Yeah, I'm like a
Community
steward.
manages you.
People the title of like I'm a community manager. I'm director of community. Really, it means that you run the department that oversees the community operations. But to say you manage it, you really can't. Like I thought you can go tell people like, hey, we're gonna go do this, and all of a sudden, like they're on Twitter just bashing the crap out of you. You're like, hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. We're gonna do that. Then here comes a meme. Look out.
You can influence,
oh my gosh.
right? See, you've lost. You don't have control. You have influence.
It's the case of not hurting the cats. It's the case of hurting the buffalo. You know, to say you don't tell buffalo where to go. You basically say, hey, buffalo, hey, nice grass over there. Might like to check it out one day. I'm going to go over there. Well, just let the buffalo decide, because otherwise, run you over.
I think that's a fair way of saying it. But again, you got to. Here was when you think you're the smartest person in the room, like you realize you're not. Like at any given time, even the smartest person in the room will look at you going like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And you're like, yeah, dude, you're like the smartest person in the room. And they're like, no, that's not me. Not even a little bit. And so that was a hard thing, because like there's people with extensive backgrounds that you have no idea, and you'll meet and you're like, yeah, blah 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 blah. I've written code that's been applied to the kernel, and you're like, oh, whoa, what? Like that was you?
That was you? Oh my gosh!
Like, oh my god, can I meet you? And you're like, and they're like, yeah, it's cool, dude. Like it's not that big of a deal. And you're like, wow, like I've met a kernel developer. Like I never thought I could. Like you guys are mythical beasts. I didn't think you existed.
The kernel.
But yeah.
Oh my gosh! But this is very true.
Right, we all learn from each other, right? I mean, you're talking about taking the NUC in and talking about Harvester, and everyone has a tool that they use that someone else hasn't used yet, and they're able to share that, even if it's just, hey, here's a different way of writing your unit test. Here's a different way of running your unit test. Here's a different way to run your pipelines. You know.
Now, there's a one thing though that we have seen though. This is also part of the reason for the show, and we go through other topics. We don't like specify, say, on a particular tech. We don't all Azure, all Amazon, or whatever. And the fact is that today there is more. I find it that people are more willing to look outside of their area, or to accept things that they've seen outside of the area as something viable, or something useful, or something that they don't just like say, oh, never, oh, what? No, it's like the folks that basically start throwing up when they see pineapple and pizza or something. It doesn't happen. It might happen in the fun social area, but when it comes to code, technology, and everything else, what I'm noticing compared to, say, 20 years ago, what a humongous difference in people's attitudes alone on it. people might say, wow, that sounds crazy. I've never seen that. But they might say that at that moment. And then they said, but tell me more. Right?
So
that's the thing.
So Flavio is the distinguished engineer at Tahoe board, right? And so Flavio, first of all, I look up to him. Like I actually do. Like he is brilliant, and he writes Rust with Vim at a terminal, right? And he is like he's at that like he just codes on like this savant level, and I look up to him. And one day he was asking me a bunch of .NET questions, and I would ask him Rust questions. We'd go back and forth. I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, I think we're going to be able to get WebAssembly, because if you don't know how kubeortn runs, policies are WebAssemblies, right? And WebAssembly, I'm going to say it right now. Mark my words. We got 2 minutes left on the show. WebAssembly is going to be the next hotness in the cloud ecosystem. It's not going to be in the web browser. It
Agreed.
will be
yeah, we've been touting it. Yep.
But he came to me and he has this .NET project. And he's trying to get this SDK for .NET with Blazor to deploy as a policy. And it's like, so he's writing it, and it's like his code is like idiomatic. Sorry about that. His code is idiomatic if he was writing C, right? Right. So I'm looking at it going like, hey, this is not how a .NET developer would write this. And like I was just trying to bring it back, and he goes, hey, he just checked it in. He goes, when you get a chance, can you look at it? And so I get to go look at his SDK, and I'm excited to it. But it was just like you don't get to see that. It's like it's just a language he doesn't write in. And so he came in, but I was pleasantly surprised he picked it up. But it's not idiomatic. It's not syntactically incorrect. It's just not something we would normally see. Right.
We wouldn't do it that way necessarily, but it gives you a perspective again on how else things can happen. Sometimes, in fact, that's where I'm seeing a lot of, in our case, like you give someone a tool and then they use it in the strange ways. Like, how did you even think of using it that way when you did it? And
I didn't know it would do that.
I didn't even think that they would think to do that. It's like, how could you even think of doing that? But then it makes you realize that, especially when you're trying to make those use cases and cover all your bases for testing, especially when you're thinking testing, sometimes you got to think it's like, how crazy. It's my favorite. I don't know. We played it one time. The peanut butter jelly test, the one where they ask a couple of kids to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and then they take their instructions and then try to follow them, and then all the madness occurs from that. It's almost true, right? In the technical sense, the idea is like, well, what you said to do this, but that's how I'm thinking. It's like, oh, well, let's get to that level. Let's figure that out, and it's lovely stuff. That's why I'm working. I think we were talking, we've got a few minutes left, or Larry was talking about where he's working. He's still deep in the weeds with the clouds, with the cloud bits, the architecture bits, the code. He's in the happy space over there. I moved into a different direction. I moved up towards the business apps, the let's just say the infrastructure on top of the infrastructure, like the SaaS world of things. So it's basically like you rely on all the tools below to do their job, essentially. And then all this stuff, which means the so-called low-codey, easy, quote unquote, I just hit the button and it goes, it's just going to work, right? No? And then when it doesn't, that's when they come to me and say, oh, your stuff sucks. I didn't do that. It's like, well, the helpful thing is I know what happens underneath there. So I can tell you, well, this probably happened because down here. Or at the very least, I know where to look. I'm like, I know that's from happening over here. I could smell it. I could tell from the flavor. It's like the guy who feels the rain coming out. Yeah, my bones, I'm so old. I can feel when that rain is coming over. I've been doing this stuff so long, kids, that I can feel it. It's happening. That's the OS level. That's the sort of stuff that I'm working on these days. So even the thing I'm getting, the accolades from Microsoft has been, how do we say it? Being able to talk this is how great that stuff is. But I always remind folks that as I'm doing it, I'm in the cloud practice because at the end of the day, this is all running in the cloud. And if the cloud doesn't work, forget about this. It's not going to happen. And what you do happens. Our stuff works.
Continue to talk. This has been a lot of fun, but we are at time. So, Robert, any last words? Anything that, you mentioned a couple of things that are coming up. Is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, we'll put them in.
Obviously follow me on Twitter, Robert Sirk, RobertSirc. Community.suse.com is where you can find all my events. You can sign up there. You can chat with me, reach out. If you have any questions, just let me know. But gentlemen, I got to go. You guys have to go. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on your show.
No problem.
You, sir.
We're going to do this again for sure, though.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Raquel, sign us out.
I'm for done.